Chicago winters weren't kind. The wind cut through the streets like knives, and snow piled on sidewalks like silent barricades. The city moved fast, full of people who had places to be and lives to live, people who didn't stop to notice the girl sitting quietly near a broken bench outside an old grocery store. Her name was Elena. She was 26, though the lines of hardship etched into her young face made her look older. Her coat was too thin for the freezing cold, patched in places, with stuffing poking out of the seams. Her shoes, once white sneakers, were now gray and cracked at the soles. She carried her world in a worn-out backpack, some clothes, a tattered blanket, and a single piece of hard, crusty bread. She hadn't eaten in 2 days. The last thing she had was a half bowl of soup at a shelter, but she'd left early the next morning after someone tried to steal from her while she slept. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. Elena sat in silence, cradling the piece of bread like it was made of gold. She was about to take a bite when a soft whimper caught her attention. She turned and saw a brown dog, thin, trembling, with eyes that looked just as lost as hers. He limped slightly, one paw injured, and his fur was matted and wet from the snow. They locked eyes. He didn't bark. He didn't beg. He just stood there, shaking from the cold, staring at her bread. Elena looked at the crust in her hand. It wasn't much. In fact, it was barely enough for her. Her stomach growled in protest as she slowly broke the bread in half. She looked down at the dog and whispered, "You need this more than I do." She reached out and held one half of the bread toward him. He hesitated for a moment, then gently took it from her hand and ate it like it was the best thing he'd ever tasted. She smiled, a soft, broken smile, and tucked the remaining half back into her coat. The dog lay beside her, curling up at her side as if he'd known her forever. That's how their story began. She named him Shadow. From that day on, they were inseparable. They wandered the streets together, slept under bridges and in alleyways, shared whatever scraps they could find. On days they were lucky, someone would toss them $1 or a sandwich. Elena always made sure Shadow ate first. It amazed people sometimes, this homeless girl who barely had enough for herself, yet always looked after her dog. Some gave her strange looks. Others shook their heads. Once, a man in a business suit asked her, "Why keep a dog when you can't even take care of yourself?" She looked at Shadow and said quietly, "Because he doesn't leave when things get hard." Winter melted into spring, but life didn't get easier. Elena had learned not to expect miracles. But kindness still surprised her. One afternoon, she sat outside a small bakery near Lincoln Park. She had found a half-eaten muffin in the trash and was breaking it into smaller pieces for Shadow when a little girl walking by with her mother stopped and stared. "Mommy, look," she said, tugging at her mom's coat. "She's feeding her dog." The mother paused and looked down at Elena. Elena avoided eye contact, embarrassed. But instead of walking away, the woman stepped inside the bakery. Moments later, she came back out with 2 warm sandwiches, a cup of tea, a bag of dog food, and a thick blanket. She knelt down and handed the items to Elena. No one should have to choose between feeding themselves and loving someone. Tears filled Elena's eyes, but she blinked them away and smiled. "Thank you, not just for the food. For seeing us." The woman nodded. "There's a shelter 3 blocks away, Hope Haven. Tell them Rachel sent you." Elena had been to shelters before, but something in Rachel's voice felt safe. That evening, Elena walked into Hope Haven with Shadow at her side. The shelter was small but clean. The man at the front desk, Marcus, welcomed her with a kind smile. "We don't turn anyone away here. Not even dogs." For the first time in years, Elena slept in a real bed, under a warm blanket, with Shadow curled up beside her. The next morning, Marcus sat down with her over a cup of coffee. "I've seen a lot of people come through these doors," he said. "But not everyone keeps giving when they have nothing. Tell me your story." She told him about growing up in Iowa. About her mom, who worked 2 jobs but always had time to help a neighbor. About how her mom died of cancer and the hospital bills took everything. About how she moved to Chicago to find work but got swept into a storm of bad luck and broken systems. Marcus listened without judgment. "You ever think about going back to school?" he asked. Elena shook her head. "Who'd want to hire someone like me?" Marcus smiled. "You'd be surprised. We have a program here, Women's Recovery and Reintegration. GED, job skills, placement. You've got grit. That's something you can't teach." She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Okay." Over the next 6 months, Elena worked harder than she ever had. She studied during the day and cleaned the shelter at night. She took care of Shadow, volunteered at local food banks, and even started helping other women in the shelter learn to read. She never forgot what it felt like to be invisible. That's why she made sure no one around her felt that way again. Word spread about the young woman with the dog who helped everyone, even when she had little herself. A local news station did a small story on her, a human interest piece titled, "Girl and Dog Beat the Streets Together." The video went viral. One day, Elena received a call from a woman named Lillian Cross, the founder of a nonprofit called Brighter Minds. She'd seen the news piece and was moved by Elena's strength and humility. "I'd love for you to come in," Lillian said. "We help people like you become leaders. I think you've got something special." Elena didn't believe it at first. But Marcus insisted. "Take the meeting. You've earned it." A week later, Elena walked into an office in downtown Chicago, nervous, dressed in borrowed clothes from the shelter's donation bin. Shadow waited outside with Marcus. Inside, she sat across from Lillian, who looked her in the eye and said, "You've lived what others can't even imagine. That's leadership. That's empathy." Lillian offered her a full-time position as a literacy coordinator, helping run programs for underprivileged youth. She didn't promise it would be easy, but she promised Elena would have a purpose. Elena accepted. She moved into a small apartment above a bookstore that partnered with the nonprofit. Shadow had a cozy bed by the window and a basket full of toys donated by coworkers. Years passed. Elena climbed the ranks, from coordinator to manager, then eventually program director. She helped design workshops for formerly incarcerated women, homeless teens, and domestic abuse survivors. Shadow became the unofficial mascot of Brighter Minds. He greeted kids every morning and sat beside them during reading circles. They called him Professor Paul. Elena never forgot where she came from. Every winter, she packed care kits, blankets, snacks, gloves, and distributed them with Shadow to the people still living where she once had. She'd kneel down beside a stranger in the cold and whisper, "This isn't the end of your story. I promise." One snowy night, as she sat at her desk writing lesson plans, she pulled out the old crusty half of bread she had kept in a jar, dry and stale now, but preserved. She looked at Shadow, now older with gray on his snout. "You saved me," she whispered. "That day, I thought I had nothing. But sharing with you, gave me everything." Outside her window, the snow fell softly on the city that had once swallowed her whole. But now was a city she had helped change.